Living on Larp, buying on time. I live! That's right, I'm a breathing, talking, animated machine. The afterlife couldn't hold me, and it can keep on trying, because I'll just keep getting back up and doing it all over again. I've been stabbed, blown up by fireballs, and even eaten by a cannibal, and I'm still here. So, welcome to the Resurrected Guide to LARP series, where I, Freebie Wits, show you how to LARP, or more specifically, how to get back up after dying. So get ready everyone, because you're about to get educated in the face. Now before we begin, Season 2 will assume that you've either already watched my entire first season, are already LARPing, or have obsessively consumed all wiki entries on LARPing to the point where you're on some sort of law enforcement agency's database. That said, I'll still be spouting information that'd be common sense to the average LARPer, so newbies aren't left behind, and also I don't have to do too much research. Besides murder mysteries where death is the point for one of the characters, dying is something you should avoid in LARP. You know what's cool? Immortality. All those people who complain about living forever because
life is meaningless without an ending
is the very definition of first world problems. In many fantasy-based LARPs with magic and the like, dying is rarely the end. You just get back up and keep on going. That said, there are still consequences to dying. Sure, the consequences are temporary and many LARPs have different flavors of dealing with them. Some LARPs simply give you a respawn timer like a video game, essentially punishing you by putting you in a timeout because you're bad at dodging fireballs or are too good at catching them with your every body part at the same time. However, this style of life and death can be problematic if you want to play a murderer. There would be no need for a detective because the victim is also the prime witness. If I get shanked by Shanky McShankington, I can just get back up after twiddling my thumbs in timeout heaven and just point out who shanked me with my thumbs. To help combat this, many LARPs introduce amnesia as a mechanic in which someone who comes back to life forgets the last few moments of their life before death. Specific times may vary between systems, and like many LARP rules, it's very honor-based. In many LARPs, when someone dies, they go to a death zone of sorts to decompose until the setting's excuse for respawning kicks in. However, sometimes the distance between death zone and the actual place they died might have a bit of travel time. During said travel time, many LARPs tell players that they can't interact with each other. Players don't instantly die either when they hit 0 hit points. No. Sometimes there's a bleed out phase where other players can try to heal, capture, or more likely loot you before your corpse turns incorporeal and literally walks away to respawn later. Games that try to be more realistic sometimes have a permanent injury mechanic upon hitting 0 hit points. These involve stuff like decreased stats or losing the use of certain skills or limbs. In these systems where death has long-lasting if not permanent consequences, folks are less likely to charge mindlessly into battle and potentially lose hours, days, if not years worth of character development. That said, some people might see these permanent consequences as character development. Then you have LARPs where death is permanent. Compare that to timeout deaths where adventurers throw themselves at a problem, constantly getting themselves killed to fix said problem. So now you know about life and death in LARP. You're welcome! To know him is to LARP him. Meta-knowledge is that dirty word that a lot of idiots use to describe something that they don't like to ensure everyone plays the same way. It's that seemingly nebulous thing that sucks the fun out of everything, and everybody knows someone who utters those cursed words in the worst possible way without knowing quite what it is. Technically speaking, meta-knowledge isn't actually a bad thing to have, it's how you use the knowledge that make or break the game, and not a lot of people realize it. Well, I'm here to fix that in the most meta way possible, by telling you about the subject while out of character. Okay, not really, I'm still in character. So get ready, because I'm going to tell you how to LARP. So what is meta? For the purposes of LARP, it's knowing that you don't know what you know despite knowing that you know, and knowing that you don't know what you do know. It's basically knowledge that your character doesn't have, even if you, the person controlling said character, does. So despite being a weapon master, your warrior would not know that a gun shoots fire and thus wouldn't use it as a weapon, unless they bludgeon someone to death with it, that is. It's having your character navigate a maze perfectly that you yourself have visited or designed, but your character is only seeing for the first time. It's having your bloodthirsty barbarian not attack the old beggar who insulted him because you saw the old beggar's character sheet and know he's got 1,000,000 hit points and unlimited uses of an instant death spell. Sometimes the lines between role-playing and metagaming can be very thin depending on how you word things. For example, metagaming would be a character saying, a fireball does 3 damage and you should be on 2 hit points and the next hit should kill you. A role player, however, might say, a fireball would kill an unarmored person instantly but would require at least 2 direct hits to kill someone like you, or something along those lines. Depending on how close you skirt the edge, suspicion on metagaming might still hound you, so some people purposely play dumb to avoid it, doing things like walking into a trap your friend was complaining about when you shouldn't have been able to hear him complain in character on the count of them being dead, for example. So with all the doom and gloom about meta being terrible, what did I mean when I said meta could be good if used properly? Well, to start with, headshots. In many LARPs, hitting someone in the head is against the rules. However, there's no reason for us as characters to not aim for the head, since a good blow to the noggin can end a battle quickly. Because of this, we are all technically metagaming to avoid what our characters might do to avoid the head, even if it becomes an easy target for whatever reason. Another reason I'm using meta properly is story. If your friend shares with you a storyline that they want to play through that starts with you both meeting up in a forest despite having no previous reason to go to said forest and you go to said forest, that's technically metagaming. But it's not the kind that anyone would criticize you for. Like everything in LARP, everything can be taken advantage of, but if it contributes to the fun of the group, then you're doing a good job. So now you know about metagaming. You're welcome! LARP! LARP changes everything. Remember back in the first episode when I was brought back to life? Wanna guess how it happened? Well, let's put it this way. It wasn't through the power of healing magic, necromancy, or some paltry godlike power. No. I've been resurrected with the power of Retcons. With Retcons, I never even died in the first place, so welcome to the second season of I'm Gonna Show You How to LARP, brought to you by Retcons. With that out of the way, we're talking about retcons, specifically why they're used, when they can be used, and if they should be used at all. When I refer to a retcon, I'm not talking about putting a previous event in a new light with previously unavailable information, like a bad guy turning out to be a good guy the entire time. I'm talking about changing the events wholesale. In other bits of media, this can be explained away with reboots, plot holes, or even writers trying to cover said plot holes with narrative cement. On screen or in a book, this can be easy enough in that the audience doesn't have any direct input or views that can change the direction of the show. I mean, if the audience complains about it enough, it'll change in the future, but the original retcon has already been shown and can't be directly interfered with. Point is, to have a retcon go forwards, in most forms of media, you don't need the audience to agree with it. It's not a democracy, it's I'm not sure what kind of political system this would fall under. Tyranny? Monarchy? Doesn't matter. For LARPs, for a retcon to work, it requires everyone who participated in the original event to agree. Even acknowledging the original events can throw everything into chaos, not the kind where everyone wears skulls and drinks blood kind of chaos either. This kind of ties into the metagaming episode I did previously, and now that I think about it, a lot of my future topics kind of tie into each other quite a bit as well. Not because I'm trying to tie everything into a cohesive series of educational videos, but because I ran out of ideas and had to split a single idea into several, and let's just redo that, shall we? Retconned! This kind of ties into the metagaming episode I did previously, and if you watch the rest of Season 2, you'll see the concept carried over as I tie everything together into a cohesive series of educational videos. Which was the plan all along. Moving on, retcons are usually a sign of a lazy or unfocused writing team, ones that don't keep track of their own lore. That said, no matter how detail-focused a person is, they'll eventually make a mistake, especially if the thing they're writing has a word count of 10 dictionaries. Seriously guys, give the writing team of
Insert favorite pop culture series here.
a break. That said, some retcons have nothing to do with the story and more to do with the mechanics themselves. In most other mediums, we call these patches. One day a fireball spell might deal 2 damage, and the next it'll deal 4 damage. Most people just ignore the fact that it's more powerful the next day, even though it's a clear retcon. If I make a character who is renowned for surviving a fireball to the face only to die from it the next day, what do? Do I just retcon my own backstory? Do I try to justify it in character saying that the original fireball weakened me, or that the chaotic nature of magic has made fireballs stronger? No, you complain up to the people who make the changes until they retcon you a fireproof face. Wait, that's a bad idea. Let me retcon that. I've only ever given good advice. Yeah! Successful example of retconning right there. So now you know all about retcons. You're welcome. Stop! In the name of LARP. Guess who has 2 thumbs, always had 2 thumbs, and will always have 2 thumbs because he follows all safety precautions around sharp objects? This guy. Safety and health is one of the most important things you can have, and while LARP as a hobby involves smacking each other with fake swords, it doesn't mean it has to involve actual injuries. So get ready, because I'm going to show you how to LARP safely. For today's video, we're focusing on combat-based LARPs where blasters blast stuff and swords sword stuff. While I consider model UNs to be LARPs, the most physical danger you'll get from those are paper cuts and nuclear annihilation. Being safe in LARP isn't just about not hitting people too hard, it's also about having the right protection. Accidents do happen and you've got to protect your equipment. I'm not just talking about your expensive foam weapons, and assuming I'm talking about guys, I'm also talking about your other weapon downstairs. I'm talking about your peanuts, your longsword, the Johnson, the one-eyed snake, the hard drive, the shaft, the hot dog, your banana, the water gun, the magic wand, the lightsaber, your family jewels, lollipop, the jawbreaker, your flute, your blasting rod, the shotgun, your cock-a-doodle-doo. Yeah, that thing. You need to protect it by wearing a cup. Oh, and if you have no idea what I'm talking about, go ask your parents later. Most LARPs have a maximum force limit, not just to protect your bones, your equipment, but also the organizers in a legal manner. If I tell you to go ham on someone and that someone gets hurt, I'm liable to get sued for encouraging the violence, even if I'm not the one who swung the blade. That said, if you hurt someone after I told you to take it easy, then legally speaking, it's 100% your fault at that point. Not to say that you wouldn't be in trouble in the other scenario, but this is a more clear-cut case. Speaking of injuries and liability, a lot of LARPs get you to sign a waiver of sorts or have a sign up that says you agree not to sue them when you enter the area to LARP. Not only does this help protect the organizers, but it also makes idiots think twice about slide tackling someone into oblivion. P.S. I'm a LARP channel, not a legal channel, so take this advice with a grain of salt. Yeah, now I'm covered too. Besides wearing a cup, there are other forms of protection that some LARPs require as a minimum. In many blaster type games, goggles are always absolutely required. You're not even allowed on the field without them. When something can fly at you with enough force to take out an eye, no amount of good aiming will be able to prevent an accident. Accidents like being hit in the extendable staff, the joystick, the medicine balls, the space between the two trees below the belt, the Eiffel Tower, the bushes, the third leg, the middle finger, the straight and narrow, the worm, the beef handle, the pistol grip, the tugboat, the baby puncher, the penis! Moral of the story, wear a cup. So now you know everything about being safe in LARP. You're welcome. This episode is never going to be monetized, is it? Want a whole lot of LARP? Want a whole lot of LARP? Do you have a place to LARP? Good. Do you have what passes for a character sheep? Good. Do you have friends to play with? We'll work on that. How about a suit of armor, swords, shields, another sword just in case, boots, more swords because you can never have enough swords, and underwear? No? Well then, you've come to the right place, so get ready because I'm going to show you how to LARP with equipment. Remember back in episode 1, season 1, when I said most LARPers prefer the term kit over costume? Well, besides trying to look more mature, there's actually a pretty good reason for it, or so we tell ourselves at night. So what is that reason? Short answer, because they're different. Long answer, because a costume is meant to be worn and look good, while kit is supposed to be used. LARPers don't just walk down a catwalk and pose for photographs, selfies, and the like. I mean, we also do that, but we also run around and fight people. If you are or know anybody who cosplays, they'll tell you that while their stuff might look good, the majority of said stuff is not practical at all. LARP kit, on the other hand, is. To a certain point in that it doesn't have to stop actual weaponry, which on the pragmatic scale of clothing puts it somewhere between HEMA and cosplay itself. Pro tip, make sure you have a summer and winter version of your outfit. Nothing sucks more than drowning in your own sweat because you decide that you needed 2 extra bits of armor. Layering is important. Make sure you have something called a soft kit to wear underneath so that the metal doesn't chafe or pinch you as much when you move around. Now, I know I've been mentioning fighting and taking hits a lot, but not all LARP kits have to involve actual armor. In many cases, it's just cloth robes. After all, mages exist. Fictionally exist in fantasy worlds, that is, and they need to wear clothes too, so that counts as kit, which is convenient. I don't know about you, but real metal armor you can strap to yourself is expensive, and so is leather. Being a mage also means you don't have to buy expensive foam equipment either, and just resort to throwing beanbags at people as spells. That said, a mage should always carry around something to protect themselves when they run out of magic. If you're playing a mage, you probably can't afford proper metal armor, so what do then? One answer involves rentals. Some LARPs allow you to borrow their equipment, which comes with admission or sometimes as a separate rental fee. More often than not, this rental fee is waived if you play an NPC and follow their every command. So what do you do if your LARP doesn't let you borrow their equipment because they don't exist or they've drawn out or whatever? The easy answer is to mooch off your friend who has multiple swords because of their impulsive need to fill that empty void with material goods. Nobody has more friends than the man with more swords. In many LARPs with differing factions, you also have to think about color so that your own team doesn't accidentally attack you out of confusion. For me, I try to keep my base kit as neutral as possible, only changing the color of my scarf to show allegiances. Red team forever! Then of course you can make your own stuff, but if you did that, you wouldn't be contributing to capitalism. So now you know about kit. You're welcome! Can't buy me Lapo, Lapo, can't buy me Lapo. Money makes the world go round. Without it, parts of the globe would be plunged into perpetual darkness and the other half would suffer under the constant, unyielding heat of the sun. Larp in that regard is no different. Needs real money to run and participate in, and fictional money for things to work too sometimes. So get ready because I'm going to show you how to Larp. I'll preface this by saying that not all LARPs actually need money both in-game and out. Murder mysteries, for example, can be done on a budget using your everyday work clothes and no in-game money need exists for the purposes of the game. Some games, however, literally can't happen without money. For the most part, these involve games that have a lot of participants where a space has to be rented out. Organizers in these cases cover the costs by charging the players a fee of admission. This can be avoided somewhat by just using a public park, but like any public space, it might not be available or convenient by the time you show up, so be sure to book things in advance. Another fee involved could be health insurance. If your LARP involves a lot of contact, then it's fair to say that accidents could happen. In which case, money would need to go towards that as well. Then, of course, you have the administrative costs, the actual organizing of stuff and so forth. The most important of which involves hiring out porta potties. Seriously, you do not want to go to a LARP without any way to relieve yourself. Then you have trademarks, copyright, registering as a business, and all the weird stuff that comes with that. But I'm not going to get into that since different countries have different laws and the fact that this is a guide for LARPing, not running one. So let's move on to something I'm actually rich in, fictional money. For LARP money, it can come in many forms, as coin, credits, or simply treasure. Whatever the case, there's always a way to get it, through a quest, through a trade, or outright stealing and looting. As in stealing through in-game mechanics, not actual stealing, that would be rude. So now you've got your hand on some gold, what next? What do you do with it all? If you said anything along the lines of buying some new equipment, I'll have to stop you right there. Most LARPs don't have $100 equipment up for grabs in exchange for fake in-game money. Unless the entrance fee is super high and covers it, this will always never be the case. At best, you'll get dollar store items like bracelets, jewelry, or in-game enchantments and potions. You can also use this money to pay other players to work for you, or sometimes buy property and in-game land to give you other benefits like more money. Due to the nature of LARP, this does pose an interesting question. Roleplay-wise, if I have 1,000,000 gold coins, there's nothing stopping me from actually buying a new sword in character. However, if I don't have the money in real life, I can't really do that unless someone is okay with giving up their expensive foam sword for said fake in-game money. Keep in mind, the reverse can also be true. I can buy out-of-game stuff with all my money and sell it in-game. In effect, turning the experience into a pay-to-win situation by using fake money to buy enchantments, potions, and mercenaries. Now, a good organizer won't look too kindly on this sort of behavior and will stamp down on people's attempt at pulling such shenanigans if it starts getting out of hand. Like many things in LARP, it can be twisted, taken advantage of, and corrupted. Just remember, LARP is a shared hobby, a group experience, and only can stay as such if everyone treats it that way. So now I've given you the currency of your mind, knowledge. You're welcome. We found LARP in a hopeless place. If you're watching this video, then it means you want to know how to LARP. To anyone who hasn't dipped their toe in the hobby, LARP can be a scary, intimidating thing. With written rules, unwritten rules, spoken but unwritten rules, and unspoken rules that'll blow your mind if anyone says one of the syllables out loud. Well, try not to be alarmed, but there's more than one way to LARP at the same LARP. So get ready, because I'm going to show you how to do all the LARP. Every community you find can be made up of smaller sub-communities. Generally, you can divide them up into the ruling class, the peasant class, etc. But that would be elitist, and we're not about that at all because being elitist is bad, and I'm good, therefore I cannot be elitist unlike you. Bringing it back to sub-communities, most LARPers generally fall into one of two different categories. You have the role players who really get into character and want to explore the world, tell a story, and generally just immerse themselves into the fantasy of LARP. Then you have the fighters who treat this more as a sport. They play to win and train to get better. If they're not tearing it up on the battlefield, they're not having fun. Now, despite how I phrase this, they aren't mutually exclusive clubs. You can join both if you want. Then you have the sub-communities found inside the fighters and role players. You've got the socializers who turn up to mingle with their real and roleplay friends. Then you have the show-offs who know HEMA and have real sword fighting skills. Half the time they get their ass kicked as they deal real-life death blows that only deal 1 damage in-game, and the other half completely destroying all opposition without breaking a sweat. Then you have the other more literal show-offs who make their own stuff because they're into stitching, smithing, and cosplay. Which reminds me, a large portion of the community love to make their own stuff and sometimes come together before actual LARP events to discuss or make said stuff. Now that I think about it, since all that crafting takes place outside the game, what they're doing by definition is literal metagaming. Speaking of metagamers, there are those who ignore or at least place character motivations low on the totem pole of priority when they play. This is a game and they get it treated as such. fight, loot, and level up. That's not to say that this is a bad way to view LARP, though this group does often butt heads with those who want to roleplay more. In my view, as long as they're not hurting anyone, I don't really care how they play the game. And that's what I like about LARP. Despite all these differing views, you'll often find LARPs made up of all different kinds of players that somehow make this all work. Besides them, you've also got the newbies, ready to be turned into any of the other categories of players above. You don't need to be good at anything to be a LARPer. As long as you're having fun that's not at the expense of others, then you're a swell LARPer in my book. Except for gatekeepers, screw those guys. Elitist snobs who consider anyone who doesn't play, dress, or roleplay to their standards as inferior. Now remember, you're not a real fan of mine unless you subscribe and hit that like button. So now you know about the different kinds of LARPers. You're welcome! My baby LARP, my baby LARP, I need you, oh how I need you. If you're new to LARP or haven't LARPed at all, then this specific episode isn't for you. This episode is for veterans of the firm sword battlefields. This episode teaches people who are already in LARP how to get you newbies into our hobbies. So if you're new to this, get out of here. Scat, go, gatekeeping powers activate. Pro tip to veterans, that is one thing you don't want to do. So how do we, as veterans of LARP, get new people into the hobby? How do we teach them how to LARP? Well, step 1, show them season 1 of I'm gonna show you how to LARP. That's all you have to do. So now you know how to get new people into LARP. You're welcome. Jokes aside, everybody has been new at least once before, and I'll show you how to be the best LARP teacher ever. So get ready, because I'm gonna show you how to show others how to get into LARP. LARP is a hobby, and like all hobbies, it's not for everyone, so don't try to force your hobby onto people who have shown no interest in it, and no, Bob, I don't want to see your icky worm collection! But if it makes you happy, then I'm happy that you have a worm collection, even if I don't want anything to do with it. Sorry for yelling at you, Bob. Generally speaking, if someone is interested in LARP, they'll be interested in LARP. That said, sometimes they won't outright say it, so you have to infer based on their past activities. Cosplayers like to dress up, so that's one sign. People who play D&D of course enjoy role-playing, so that's another sign. And of course, people who watch my videos are also the type who likely will want to get into LARP given the chance. Honestly, as long as you yourself are passionate about LARP, then you might already have a friend ask about your hobby if you've mentioned it before. The hints are subtle, but they're there. They might ask you how your LARP event went. They might ask you if you had fun. They might even ask you how one joins the game. Such subtle hints. So after identifying your potential LARP recruit, what's your next step? Should you get them a weapon, some armor, set them down to create a long backstory that'll fit in the rest of the world in which your own LARP character already inhabits? Well, you can do all that, or you can just go to LARP. The biggest thing about LARP to remember is that it's a group activity, a community, and a good community is there to help. Sure, you can outfit your friend on your own, and that's fine and all, but having a small army help you do it is even better and will make your newbie friend feel even more included. Trust me, before you know it, the rogue will have lent the guy his sword, the knight will let him borrow his spare shield, and the lawkeeper will have asked a bunch of probing questions about their new original character. And hey, if they don't have a character idea, that's fine. Just get them to play a summoned character, an NPC, or something that doesn't require so much thinking to roleplay. Point is, it takes a village to raise a newbie. In other words, peer pressure. Trap them in your LARP using the trap of social convention. They might be able to say no to you, but they can't say no to everyone. So now you know how to get others to LARP. You're welcome! That's how strong my LARP is. Whoa. This episode is less of a guide on how to LARP and more of a rant, a narcissistic TED talk in which I get to flex my brain and show how smart I am. A lot of what I'm about to talk about crosses into game design, so if you're into that sort of thing, then get ready. No, I'm not running out of ideas for LARP guides, I'm just branching out to include a more varied audience to boost interest in the hobby. Yeah, that's what I'm doing, honest. So get ready, I'm gonna show you how to LARP. Kinda, not really, close enough. No matter how much focus you put into role-playing at LARP, the underlying mechanics and numbers will always still matter on some level. Having a metal helmet gives you an extra 2 hit points, sword strikes deal 1 damage, and the fireball requires the caster to chant it before throwing a sanctioned beanbag, etc. Generally speaking, if a LARP has a spell that does damage, then it means they have abilities that are limited in some way, and the only way to increase this limit is by leveling up. It's weird to me that RPGs and leveling up is so ingrained with each other despite the specific phrasing of role-playing having nothing to do with numbers getting bigger. Regardless, the feeling of getting stronger without actually having to do constant exercise and eating right is so seductive that some players simply choose to stick around their LARP for that feeling of power, even if everything else becomes stagnant. This leads to an interesting problem with no clear answer. What do you do when you have a group of players get too powerful? In an ideal world, the more powerful players are spread out, but all too easily a good number of them will be in a single faction. If they get tired of being overpowered, they might just decide to retire their characters, but we can't trust people to always do such a thing. We can always make leveling up only give small amounts of power and make it grow slow, however that in of itself might make people feel like they're putting too much time and effort into something with little payoff. If you give too much power too quickly, they might find themselves soon hitting a ceiling and stalling with nowhere else to grow. At that point, what do? If the answer is to add more levels and more skills and abilities, then stop. Just stop. It's a terrible idea in LARP. If this was a video game, that'd be fine, but in a LARP where you have to memorize how much damage each spell does to you in the event that you might get hit with it, adding more numbers and effects to remember only makes it more difficult for newbies to play. Nothing kills immersion quicker than calling time out to figure if lightning bolt stuns or dazes the target, and then trying to figure out if there's a difference between being dazed or stunned. If one were to add more abilities, I recommend that they only affect the person who uses them, so if you want to memorize more stuff, you don't force new people to do it. Point is, the bigger the rule set, the harder it is to learn. The harder it is to learn, the less new people you'll have. The less new people you have, the less people you'll have in the future. The less people you have in the future, the smaller the LARP. The smaller the LARP, the bigger chance it might dissolve. I'm not telling you to not put in more mechanics, I'm just saying you should think very, very hard before introducing them. So you now know everything about feature creep as it pertains to LARP. You're welcome. LARP Shack! Baby LARP Shack! Yeah, okay, we're doing this now. What's better than having several hours of LARPing? A whole day, 2 days, a weekend, a whole week, or even month? If something is good, then having more is better, just like cake. But to live this dream, you have to do the unthinkable. You have to go camping. So get ready, because I'm going to show you how to camp at LARP. The biggest difference between camping on its own versus camping at LARP is the number of people you camp with. Now don't get me wrong, you can totally camp with a group, but that's more of an option, whereas LARP it's a requirement. Besides that, you don't really do the classic camp-based activities. For example, you don't have to go fishing, you don't live off the land, and you certainly don't have to learn any survival skills. Most LARP camping trips take place not in the absolute wilderness, but rather pre-set up camping areas, often with modern day amenities like shelter, toilets, and sometimes Wi-Fi. Anyways, let's focus on the first two aspects I mentioned. When I say shelter, I mean things like full-on cabins with carpets and air conditioning, making the whole experience less like camping and more like a sleepover next to nature. On the other end of the scale, shelter can be something as simple as a gazebo over a couple benches and the like, not enough to live under, but enough to make a meal with your friends. In these cases, you'll need to bring your own tents, which I'll get into later. Then we have toilets. These might be the fully stocked facilities of the cabin, or they can slide down to something like a porta potty all the way further down into a literal hole in the ground, which is less than ideal. Trust me, when you're wearing a full suit of armor, you want an enclosed toilet with a door covering you as you do your business. Now don't get me wrong, the openness of the wilderness is great for when you need to stretch and disassemble your kit, but exposing yourself to your fellow LARPers is not how you make friends. Some LARPs are okay with you bringing whatever tent or shelter you want. Others ask for setting accurate stuff. Some places actually give you a choice and set up 2 zones for these 2 different tents. The first zone is an out-of-character area where you can retreat to have a break without danger of being attacked in character. The second zone is what I'd like to call the danger zone. If you set up here, then make sure you're not stripped down to your underwear, because an attack could happen at any time. Only the most crazy, hardcore roleplayers will be prepared to literally roleplay in their sleep, and I, for one, aren't even that crazy. That said, a lot of LARPs for safety reasons usually have a cutoff time for combat, even in these danger zones. Fighting during the day is completely different to fighting at night with no light around, which of course could hypothetically lead to you charging into a group of enemies who turn out to be a bunch of tents that would then wrap around the poor knight, who then tumbles down the hill and knocks out the wizard who's about to head to bed. Hypothetically, of course. Wait, the video's about to end? Stop! Wait, let me just finish by saying bring lots of food, water, and sunscreen, because only idiots think they can take on the sun and wind. And, what else? Well, I can't really think of it, so I guess it doesn't matter too much. So now you know how to camp at LARP. Oh god, bugs! You need bug repellent! How deep is your LARP? Your LARP, how deep is your LARP? For most of my videos, I have a theme or topic I stick to. Before I make a video, I brainstorm what I want to talk about and do a bunch of research to make sure that you, the viewer, get as much information jammed into your brain as humanly possible. And then I find an appropriate love song to sing through the disclaimer. Sometimes, though, the amount of research is too small to make a proper video out of, so today I've compiled a list of miscellaneous tips and tricks for an inspiring LARPer. Tips that'll help make the most of your time before, during, and after the event. So get ready, because I'm going to show you how to LARP. First thing about winning LARP is knowing that you can lose. I don't mean that you have to remember that losing is a possibility, I mean that it's okay to lose, that sometimes losing is fun, that playing a character with flaws who gets tricked or beaten is one way you can be a winner. While LARPing and sports both share a few elements, they are in the end both very, very different beasts. Another tip for LARPers is if someone asks you, "Are you sure?" you should probably take a moment to think about what you're doing before you're about to do it. Also, if you need to stall for time, be sure to ask, "Are you sure?" and that should buy you a bit of time before they go back to doing what they're about to do, likely murdering you if you needed to stall for time. Befriend your enemies. I'm not talking about having a righteous paladin marry the evil warlock, I'm saying you should talk to each other out of character. Maybe discuss future plot elements you both can do. Have a shared backstory maybe, so that you can both go onto the field of LARP and have something to play off. You don't have to predetermine who wins each fight, but you can certainly collude with each other to make the inciting incident occur. Trust me when I say having a history with another character can make a real difference, it can make a real difference. Also, give people the benefit of the doubt and communicate. If you think someone is cheating, try to talk them out of character. It's entirely possible that you're the one making the mistake, or that they're not intentionally cheating. I know, there's some real scumbags out there, but let's try not to go to that conclusion straight away. Using the excuse, "It's what my character would do," is just that, an excuse. Asking for permission is better than asking for forgiveness, because at the end of the day, nobody can be forced to play. If things get really bad, there's nothing stopping people from just leaving out of character. Summoning rituals have a high chance of failure, but don't let that dissuade you from doing them anyways. They make convenient plot points. And my last LARPing tip, and this is a big one, make everyone feel included. I've mentioned or at least alluded to this tip before, but it really is that important. Most of us LARPers, due to our interests, have probably experienced being left out on some level. I'm not telling you to sacrifice your happiness for someone else, only that you shouldn't dismiss them before they really LARP. We all have to start somewhere, so let's try to start off on the right foot, okay? So now you know how to LARP. You're welcome. Just a bigger Hunk'o Larp. The final boss fight is such a widespread staple in the media that no matter where you look, it's there. You have the big giant eye thing in Lord of the Rings, Bowser in almost any Mario game, and literally Hitler in anything World War II related. LARP in that regard is no different. Today, on this final episode, I'm going to tell you all about the big bad monster, the final, end-all, be-all of conflicts. So get ready, because I'm going to show you how to do your final LARP like a boss. So when I talk about boss fights, I mean a fight that takes place at the end of a story arc or the last game of the year where everyone goes off and does holiday Christmassy stuff before returning the next year filled with candy canes and sugar-based regrets. Very rarely does this boss fight indicate the final game ever. A LARP isn't just going to end because of one of these fights, but if a LARP knows in advance that it's going to have a last game, then this is usually the kind of spectacle they'll include to make it memorable. Note that I'm ignoring player characters who are very powerful, skilled, or in some cases literal bosses of evil factions. What I'm referring to here when I talk about bosses is boss fights in the more gamey way. This can be a single giant boss with lots of hit points or even an army usually led by that single giant boss. Mechanically speaking, a boss fight can serve as a finale as I've mentioned to ensure all the power and resources you've gained is justified and put to use. Now there are three important factors when making a boss fight. The first is the story. Some LARPs don't care about this and the community in these sorts of LARPs are just happy to wail on stuff with foam weaponry. But for the LARPs that do care, usually this boss is behind a bunch of earlier problems or perhaps was summoned/created by the overarching baddie. Regardless, a lot of people find it hard to care about a fight if there's no context behind it. Long story short, it's easier for some people to beat something off if they have a story for it. The second factor is costuming. Now I know, I shouldn't be using the word costuming after I've gone to such lengths to call what we do as kit. But the word kitting sounds kinda weird to me. I'm going to be talking about kitting, kiting, knitting, bleh. Just doesn't work for me. Anyways, a boss monster has to be identifiable as the boss. Even if they're not that scary, they have to be at least look more intimidating than their non-boss-like counterparts. Even if they're the most powerful thing in the universe, nobody's gonna take them seriously if they rock up to the battle in their PJs. There is, however, one big issue with this piece of advice. An issue that the most wise, mature, and adult of us will ever know and experience. An issue that will age anyone who hears it. The cost. Buying a metal suit of armor is expensive, but we tell ourselves it's okay because we'll wear it all the time at LARP, making it worth it. A boss fight, however, means it'll only see action once unless you keep resurrecting them or if they're not the type to actually fight until the finale. Or you can just be rich and keep buying new boss outfits whenever you need it, whatever. Relatedly, you have to think about how practical the boss costume is. Now this advice kind of applies to everyone, but more so to bosses. Big scary costumes can be hard around to move in, so you have to keep things relatively light. No matter how awesome and quick you are, anyone in what amounts to a fancy looking straitjacket doesn't really inspire fear. Now that we have the context and the fearsome appearance out of the way, what do we need now? What's the third thing we need to make a boss fight a boss fight? The answer is we need the actual mechanics. The louder actions to their words, the dance to their talk, the deeds to their creeds. Technically, this should be divided into two different sections, but it still comes down to how good the boss is at fighting people. We're talking about who gets to be the boss monster. Ideally, you'll want someone who is actually a skilled fighter. Someone who, when fighting another person of equal or higher mechanical level, can still come out on top through sheer personal speed and skill. Because if you make someone who is physically slow and can't fight, it turns from a boss fight into a particularly tough pinata to beat up for treats. Only instead of candy, it's level ups and maybe magical loot. Mechanically speaking, you can also give them lots of abilities. Just try not to do anything too new with abilities. Sure, you can give them a brand new awesome venom beam laser breath, but if the fight has to stop so you can explain what it does, then you're just pausing the action to boast how awesome your attack was. Yeah, it's a bit boring to reuse the same spells over and over again, but it keeps the action going. Anyways, most boss monsters are also immune to being stunned, pushed around, or instant death type abilities. Generally, you want them to last a while, which is why they get lots of HP as well. However, you have to be very careful with this. The worst thing you can do is give the boss monster too many hit points. It'll just tire everyone out, including the boss itself. To make things more interesting, sometimes the boss can be indestructible until certain conditions are met. At which point, it's less of a boss fight and more of a very violent puzzle game that only works with a LARP group that would enjoy that sort of thing. You really gotta know your audience. A good idea is to mix up the two. Give the boss the potential to go down normally, but maybe have some sort of quest/puzzle related item that would deal a bunch of damage or even negate an immunity or disable a devastating ability they have, like say finding and throwing enchanted pepper at the dragon to make it cough and remove its devastating breath attack. Point is, fighting a boss has to be tough and challenging, and bringing it down has to feel cathartic or at least worth it. Now, all of this advice is useless if no one's having fun. As long as the players and community are into it, then that's all that counts. Speaking of the community, the biggest boss fight any community has to face is toxicity. So let's band together and fight this thing. Make sure everyone's included, respect people's limits, encourage their stories, look after yourself, your health, mental state, and wallet. Compliment everyone's kit and share your candy. So now you know how to be a real boss in LARP. You're welcome. And thank you for sharing this journey with me. Remember, the real boss is you.